with this woman who's so extraordinary. So,
Oh, and I am equally. This is amazing. This is incredible. Thank you, and thank you all of you for being here.
the movie is incredible. It's absolutely brilliant. So, might as well get started. It's going to probably be a little bit more like a conversation, if that's okay with you. Because I'm using this as an opportunity to talk to her about this movie. Anyway, it really is extraordinary. I mean, I can't imagine being handed this inanimate object. I mean, obviously it's theoretical, and then non-narrative, and then out of that, this extraordinary, like, feminist manifesto that's a cultural phenomenon. I mean, just imagine. I mean, that's like, I don't know. It's extraordinary. So how?
Thank you. I think that I mean, how to start? Well, like you say, I mean, I think that the sort of terror of it was that, you know, it's an object, and it's there's no inherent character or story. Because the nature of Barbie is that it's to be projected onto by whoever the player is. But I think the thing that I felt at the very beginning was this sense of all of the conversation around Barbie, of like what it is a complicated icon that is both, you know, in some ways ahead of times. Like, you know, there was a Barbie who went to the moon before women had credit cards. But then also, if she was like a human woman, she wouldn't be able to stand. So that's complex. And I thought that there was something in this kind of mess of it. And there was something in this, something generational in it. And then, of course, I had my own memories of Barbie, and I remember looking at Barbie in the toy store and loving Barbie, and loving her hair. I don't know what that was, what I was fixated on, but her hair. And my mom didn't like Barbie. My mom was,
Really?
for all the reasons that you wouldn't be interested in Barbie for your kid, and that conversation, and then I got hand-me-down Barbies from girls in the neighborhood who had been played with already, and then, you know, I cut their hair more, and then that kind of went into Kate McKinnon's character, and all of these little things that, it's something where it's like, okay, I have my own personal story around this, and it for me is a mother-daughter story in my own life, and then it's there's just been all this noise and conversation around it. I was like, well, maybe the story is in the mess, and that's where we started to find it when we started writing it, and then coupled with the fact that we were writing it in the midst of we started writing it in March of 2020, and so it was the sense that there were no movies, no one was making movies, no one was going to movies.
It was
gone. And it felt like, in a way, it was like, well, if you got to make one last Bananas movie, what do you want to make? And it was this. It was also, but it gave you kind of freedom, because it felt like maybe the world's never coming back again. And I think it kind of led to this kind of tragic euphoria of writing it.
Oh, it's brilliant. I'm really kind of totally amazed at it. But how did it come to you in the first place?
In the first place, it came to me from Margot Robbie. She had as a producer and as an actor, and I'd gotten to know her a little bit in actually the time that we talked about the first time I got to meet you. Yes, and she had I, Tanya, and I had Lady Bird, and I admired her so much as an actor, but then I got to know her as a producer, and I was really impressed by her, and I thought, well, if she ever wants to do something, I'd love to do something with her. So she came to me and said, would you want to write this? And I said yes, and I'd like to write it with Noah because I hadn't written with him for a while, and it's so much fun. And I signed us up for it, and he didn't really know that I'd done that. So, but then he found out, and he was resistant at first, but then he got on board. But it was really that Margot was the person who was the exciting thing for me initially, because I think she's just so smart, and she's such a brilliant. I mean, like this performance, there's so many things in it, but it seems so effortless, but it's such a complicated performance because it's constructing a plastic doll that has no interior life or self, and then kind of hilariously and humiliatingly letting that crumble, and then having this other person who's always been there emerge. And I think there's something about it, it's like the entire linchpin, everything hangs on that performance, and she does it with such seeming ease, yeah. But it's such a bizarre task for an actor to undertake, and I think she does it so beautifully. But I think that was another thing writing for her was, I also knew when we were writing that we could write the most impossible seeming tasks and that she could figure out how to do it, because it's that confidence you have when you know that the actor is that caliber.
Right. Just extraordinary. And but even just the beginning, like the whole kind of 2001, obviously that. I mean, first of all, it's like a microcosm of the whole film. The whole film is that in there, and she's the monolith, and the monolith is whatever you want it to be. That's what I loved about the 2001 as well, and I just love these little girls, like smashing those dolls, and so it's revolutionary.
The 2001 sequence, like I had written it in, and I always thought about Barbie as like, if you kind of took Barbie as like having her own ontology or her own kind of creation story, is that like, if you have the kind of Judeo-Christian framework of like, there was God created man, and then he took a rib and made woman, and that like, to me it was so hilarious that it was this idea of like, there's Barbie, and then as a total afterthought there's this guy Ken, and I was like, what a wonderful reversal of everything, and that she was the first, the only thing on the market were baby dolls for girls, and that was like Ruth Handler's insight, was that she was watching with her daughter play, and she was like, oh, my daughter doesn't want to pretend to be a mother, she wants to pretend to be an older girl, a woman. And but I wrote it in, and then many times leading up to shooting it, I was like, am I really starting this movie with a 2001 riff? Like this, I mean, I was like, the people who don't know what it is are just gonna think it's weird, and the people who do know will think it's weird. I didn't know what it was gonna do, but then to be honest, I pitched it to my therapist, who thought it was funny. And I was like, well, we have one woman on the Upper West Side who likes it. And I was like, well, I just have to trust that. But then it was like, it is also everything in the movie, because it's also a joke, but it was also something that we had to do. I only wanted to do it if we could do it beautiful. Like, it really do it, really build it, really shoot it great and make it work. And Rodrigo and the production designer Sarah Greenwood and the visual effects team, we shot it in, we used a volume stage. We talked about actually doing front screen projection, but it would have taken my entire shooting schedule to do that, so we didn't do that. But we did use the original, like Kubrick's plates, and then we put, the VFX team put them into the volume stage, and we built giant legs for Margot. So those are Margot's legs, as giant plastic legs. So that was all in camera, and it was very. I mean, it was shooting. It was beautiful, but it was like this kind of. It almost became part of the joke was how much integrity we were trying to bring to the thing, and the thing I kept saying, even the whole the entire design team is so incredible, and I just kept thinking, Rodrigo Prieto had just shot Killers of the Flower Moon, and then he came to prep Barbie, and I thought, this is perverse. But then he loved it, and then he took everything, his immense talent, his insights, his vision, and he applied that to this with the same seriousness. And I think it's that sort of seriousness of play that we were trying to elevate, and then also just this kind of, 2001 is. And we screened it for everyone, and when you watch it again, you still can't believe it. I can't believe it. And I even have the experience when I'm watching 2001, there's some shots where I'm like, okay, I know he did that, he composited this, and then it's like one of the times when the spacecraft is landing into the thing, and then you see men, and you're like, how did you actually do that? And I don't know. It's a marvel. And I think we approached everything with this, joy of the difficulty.
That's a great parameter with which to, I guess, approach life. But so then you call up Ryan Gosling and say, look, you're an afterthought. That's what, and he said, yes. How did that happen?
Well, actually, in the version of the script I sent him, I think it said Barbie, and then it had said and Ken, and then and Ken was scratched out, and it was like, no, like he had done it, and then we told him no. But we wrote the part for Ryan. So Noah and I wrote the part for Ryan, and I think part of that was because we knew we were writing it for Margot, so we thought, well, let's cast this movie that will never happen, and we casted him, and then I had to meet him because I didn't know him, and it took a minute to get all the pieces together, but he understood it deeply right away. Like in the very first phone conversation we had, he was already so funny, and he already had so many ideas, and he also took it so seriously that it was like, the thing that we had imagined it was coming true already. Like it was just a melding. He said something, it was we were talking about a scene, and when he says to Barbie, in the reversal, when he says, it's not Barbie's Mojo Dojo Casa House, it's Ken's Mojo Dojo Casa House. He said, do you think that Ken might have a tear in his eye? And I was like, I think he does. And then I was like, oh, he understands this man's pain. And then he also told me he has daughters, and he said, I knew that they had a Ken doll somewhere, so I went to go look for it, and I found it face down in the dirt in the backyard under a rotting lemon. And I thought, I understand this man. And I was like, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. So from that moment to the movie being made, it took a minute, but it was like it's like when an actor instantly knows exactly what you mean. And I felt like we had this sort of instant mind meld around Ken and what Ken meant, and he filled those tiny shoes.
It's such a brave performance, though, for both of them, but especially for him. It's so self-effacing.
Yeah.
And for him to go there, like, with complete abandon.
Yeah.
I find extraordinary.
Yeah, no, I think it was also for him because, I think partly because the movie is about toys, so a lot of people brought their own childhood stuff to it. I mean, just who they were as kids, if they played with dolls or Barbies or figures or what they thought. And, he talked a lot about, he grew up singing and dancing, and he acted as a kid and did a lot of that stuff. And then he said, he was like, I worked really hard to put distance between myself and that kid, and to sort of reject that kid. And then he said part of what he needed to do with Ken is bring that kid out and say, and it was very sweet. He was like, I owe that kid everything. He got me here, but I pretended I didn't know him for so long. And then he was like, I gotta let him out for this musical.
Closure for him.
Yeah.
Almost an emancipation.
I think it was, and it was and then it's it really was, there was a lot of that with all the actors. I mean, certainly when America and I were working on her part, and we ended up calling it her aria, her Gloria aria, is, she brought writings in from her life, and we embroidered it with things that were very specific to her, and that she thought about. I mean, it was everyone was bringing something that felt sort of scary to bring to the table, and it doesn't look the same for everyone. And I think that was Ryan's, that was America's, and then I think Margot, it was sort of the thing of she's so skilled and she can do anything. And there are moments in this movie where she's sort of just lets go and it happens to her. And I think for her that feels like the most scary place to be, because there's nothing to be done. Right. It's not you're not executing the scene. You're it's an act of undoing. And I remember those days, and I think she felt vulnerable. Yeah. And I think we all did, but that's why it felt like the movie became this container for everyone to be safe in.
I think that's why it's such again, another reason why it's so extraordinary, because you find these elements of people that are so real and so personal, and there's no way you can't identify with it in some way, man, woman, child, whoever you are. But that monologue is just phenomenal, it's just impossible to be a woman. I mean, and I think people don't understand, if you're not a woman, you don't really, I don't think you spend the time to really kind of process that. And as a woman, you just ignore it, so it's always sort of a state of denial to a certain extent. And then here's this woman just laying it all out. And it's very candid, very naked, and very endearing.
Yeah. No, it felt that way on the set. And actually one of the things that was, we shot it over 2 days, and she went all kinds of different directions with it emotionally. But one thing, I was crying really early when she started doing it, and women were crying on the set. But then the men were crying on the set too, and we were shooting in London, so it was mostly British crew, and so they're not the most in touch with their emotions, I'd say. And and I'd look over, and these guys would be like, and I was like, oh, this is, and then it actually did, I thought of that she's articulating this specific conundrum around being a woman, but it occurred to me that everyone, especially in this modern world, it very has a tightrope they're walking somehow. That they feel if they fall off of it, it's just disaster. And I think the men, even though it's a different laundry list, also had that feeling of I feel that fear inside me of either way, it's a sheer drop. And I think that's why they were emotionally connected to it. And it was always kind of finding this thing where, we want it to be funny, but allowing the sort of ridiculousness and the heightenedness of it to also give us the permission to do something that's more uncomfortable.
That's what's so skillful about it, because it really sneaks up on you. You think, okay, I can kind of keep it at arm's length, but you can't. It just gets right inside you. Yeah. And so you came up with this idea, and then you go to Warner Brothers and you say, okay, were you met with any resistance? Or mystification?
Yeah. I mean, it was not, I guess I have to say, like, Warner Brothers and Mattel both really gave me just an extraordinary amount of freedom. And it's, in a way, I think sometimes, any movie that gets made, as you well know, no one says yes, like, to all of it or any of it. There, the sort of stance, you're always talking through things, fighting for things, kind of working out what it is that you want to make, or how is it going to get done. And we certainly went through that process on this movie, but really early on, there were just clear champions who thought it was exciting at Warner Brothers, and then also Enon, who is the CEO of Mattel, really said, "I trust you," to me, and I think it was almost like we found a sort of like loophole in the universe, because it was like they hadn't made a movie before, so they also didn't have a sense of like, no, this is how we do it here. Like, it was to be invented, and he just gave me a lot of faith, and he just, I walked him through everything. There were definitely, people had questions. I think, understandably, I think people at Mattel, some people were worried about the issues with Barbie that we bring up, because the brand itself has really evolved, and they were like, why are we bringing up stuff that maybe we've solved? And I was like, yes, but the collective memory of Barbie is still these issues. So there were plenty of moments of resistance, but I don't know how dissimilar it is to just filmmaking in general, which is always that. I think I started kind of putting together the dream team of my creative team before. In retrospect, I realized I did this in the wrong order, but I think it's because I come from independent film, which is that you just sort of start making it. Yeah. Like, you don't wait for anyone to tell you can.
And then it happens.
Yeah, and you're like, oh, it's too late. We're here. It's like because I called Rodrigo and Sarah and Jacqueline Duran, who did the costumes, who I knew I'd worked with on Lady Bird, and I got this whole creative team together, and then I had Margot, and I called Ryan, and nobody had ever given me a green light or told me that the script was approved, and I was like, but look at all these people who've said yes. But it wasn't a strategy. It was just sort of like, I just keep the ball moving, and then I think that's one of the greatest lessons from coming from really truly low budget, is you don't I think you don't have an expectation that there's gonna be somebody who ever says yes, other than you have to say yes to yourself and your own idea, and just kind of keep going.
I was already in the Middle East shooting Hurt Locker, and then realized that we actually had somebody who wanted to make Hurt Locker, so it was like that.
Yeah. Right, I know. I think I worked with AD, who worked on one of your films, and said essentially the same thing. It was like, we were already there just setting up an office, and and we didn't know when it was
gonna happen or not, I don't know, but we're there making it.
It becomes harder to say no once there's people there.
Yeah,
And then you're like,
exactly.
well, you know, we're going. And,
Yeah. So process, just out of curiosity, like, okay, you had Rodrigo. Had you worked with him before?
No, I've wanted to. I've always loved his cinematography, and he was sort of my dream Ken. And so he was just. I actually think when I approached him, I was like, well, I'll get his no first. And then magically he said yes. But I had always I had met him and talked to him, and I was and I had also I knew some people who'd worked with him on other things, and they just said, you know, obviously he's so talented, but also they had spoken about how deeply lovely he is as a person, and I thought, oh gosh, yeah, I just would like to work with him.
Oh, that's so great. And then, like on that chase, did you storyboard ever? Or?
Yeah, we storyboarded. I never
So beautifully embroidered, right?
Yeah, I never storyboarded as much as I did on this film. Do you storyboard always? Yes.
Not always, but just complicated sequences like that.
Yeah, I had storyboarded a sequence in. I mean, I do my own bad storyboards. All the and like terrible. Yeah, I'm not a great artist. I'm always impressed by directors who can really, like, they're almost like animators. I don't have that skill, but I'd done a storyboard sequence for Little Women when Amy falls in the ice, because that was a sort of a complex thing, and we needed to know how to do all of it and figure it out. So I'd done that, but that was a very small sequence. And this I storyboarded to one degree or another most of the movie. Of this one. And I did. I had a storyboard artist, David Alcock, who is just extraordinarily talented. He makes beautiful storyboards, and they're directable. They're playable, and there's so many things on this movie that I was learning how to use and do, and I found my way with storyboards because I think they're extremely helpful, but they're also, you can't just shoot storyboards. You won't have a movie. It's strange that way, but you can't. But they give they're incredibly useful for everyone on the team to start to see.
So everybody's on the same page, that's what I find.
Yes.
Okay, and also it's helpful to see it, and then you go, oh, wait a minute, I don't want it to be like that.
Yes.
So there's many advantages.
And then we also had, I was using more visual effects. We have, there were tons of builds, and we did big soundstage builds, and then miniature builds, but we also would then, photograph, but then scan the miniatures so that they could use the texture if they, had to continue something on. But we were using, I was using Farsight for the first time. I'd never done anything like that, and Farsight can, gosh, I just realized this is really in the weeds, but if it's boring, I'm sorry. But Farsight, it's almost like you can get a sense of what a stage would look like. And since we were in stages, it was easier because you could kind of input the dimensions of what the stage is and kind of see what it would be ahead of time with the camera. It's imperfect. It somehow doesn't quite translate exactly how you think it's going to translate. And the same is true with the transportation sequences, which were all builds. Those were all like, when they go on those different vehicles, those are all, it's like 2.5D. There's 3 planes of movement, so that the foreground is like when they're on the bicycle.
3.
Yes.
3 or 4 planes.
Exactly. Yeah. So the bicycle's like there's tulips on a treadmill that are going this fast, so that it creates the movement, and then the midground goes a little slower, and then the background goes slow, and then there's a man holding like butterflies on a puppet string, which I was like, I don't know, what am I doing? But also, this is incredible. But like when I did a version of like sort of previs with that, just because we had to match the horizon lines, and I just wanted to make sure it all worked. But actually, it's useful. But again, same with storyboards. It's not perfect. Once you get a camera in front of it, it just changes slightly. Yeah. I mean, so it doesn't. I think it's so amazing to work with these tools, but I also think it's something where once you get cameras on people, something changes, and and that's the magic of movies. But in any case, that was so long-winded. But
no, it's wonderful. I think we're getting.
They're like, stop talking about Farsight. Also, I just was like, I thought that was the creepiest name that they could have come up with. Farsight. It looked like they're reading my emails later.
Well, this has been extraordinary, really extraordinary. So thank all of you for being here.